to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where tonight a quiet chocolatier's shop glows softly at the end of a cobbled lane, waiting to reveal a gentle evening surprise. As you settle in, let your body find a place of comfort. Feel the weight of the day beginning to loosen and drift away. If your hands are busy, let them become still. If you are lying down, allow the pillows and blankets to cradle you just as they are, without needing to change anything at all. Take a slow breath in, letting the air fill your chest, and then let it sigh its way out, longer and easier than before. Imagine that with every out-breath, the day's worries slip away like small autumn leaves on a quiet stream, carried gently out of sight. In your mind, you find yourself at the edge of a small town as evening settles in. Cobblestones are washed with the warm glow of lanterns. Distant windows are lit with soft golden rectangles of light. The air is cool, touched with the faint scent of rain, and underneath that there is something sweeter, deeper, like rich cocoa and warm vanilla drifting through the streets. With each breath, that chocolate-sweet air becomes a little more vivid, a little more comforting. Your shoulders ease down, your jaw softens, your eyes may grow heavier, and that is all right. You are simply listening, drifting, floating. At the far end of the lane, where the cobblestones curve gently toward the river, there is a small shop with wide front windows and a painted sign in curling letters. Inside, a single lamp glows like a soft ember in the dark, waiting. Now, as you sink more deeply into rest, the story turns and settles into itself. In that little shop, on that quiet evening, the chocolatier prepares for an unexpected delight. In the heart of the town lived a chocolatier named Elio. His shop was not grand or famous, but it was loved. Its windows were often fogged with warmth from the inside, and the bell above the door chimed with a gentle, silvery note whenever someone stepped in from the street. By day, the shelves were lined with neatly arranged boxes tied in ribbons, gleaming glass jars filled with truffles, and little plates offering samples that disappeared almost as soon as he set them out. On this evening, however, the door was locked, and the sign was turned to closed. The lamps were turned low, and the town outside had grown quiet, wrapped in the hush that comes after supper time, when most people have drawn their curtains and settled into their homes. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting perfume of chocolate. It floated up from the marble-topped counter, from the copper pots cooling on the stove, from the trays of freshly dipped caramels that were resting on racks. A warm, soft glow spilled from the hanging lamp over the workbench, pooling in golden circles on on the worn wooden floor. In the corner, on a cushion by the heater, a small, sleepy cat named Nutmeg lay curled in a gentle comma of fur. Her paws flicked now and then as she dreamed, her whiskers twitching as though she were chasing something deliciously elusive through a field of lavender and cream. Elio moved slowly and quietly around his shop, his sleeves rolled up, his apron dusted with a fine constellation of cocoa powder and sugar. He was not tall, and his hair was always a little unruly, but his hands were steady and kind. Even at the end of a long day, there was a softness about him, as though he were wrapped in his own gentle patience. He hummed under his breath as he worked, a tune that had no words and no particular beginning or end, drifting through the small shop like a feather on a breeze. His movements were unhurried. He checked the temper of the chocolate cooling in the bowl before him, watching the sheen as it settled, glossy and calm. Tonight was special. For days he had been thinking about a new creation, something to share with the town for the first crisp nights of the season. The evenings had grown cooler, the sky arriving earlier each day in deep shades of violet and blue, and people came into the shop with scarves around their necks and cheeks, pink from the wind. He had decided on something comforting and quietly surprising, a chocolate infused with the softness of warm milk, a hint of honey, and a whisper of an ingredient he had not used in many years, a delicate note of orange blossom. It was a flavor he remembered from his childhood, from a time when his grandmother would stir steaming milk in a small kitchen while the rain pattered against the windows. As he stood at the workbench, he lifted a small amber bottle from the shelf and held it to the light. Inside, the liquid caught the glow, shimmering like captured dusk. He unstoppered it carefully, letting a single drop fall into the bowl of melted chocolate. The fragrance unfolded slowly, not sharp or loud, but gentle, like the memory of sunshine on the first soft day of spring. He stirred, watching the chocolate ripple and thicken, moving like a calm river over smooth stones. The air seemed to change with it, the shop growing even more fragrant, as though warmth and sweetness had taken on their own quiet life. Outside, a light rain began to fall, tapping delicately against the window panes. The sound blended with the faint ticking of the clock on the wall and the soft rhythm of the chocolatier's breathing. The world beyond the shop felt distant now, folded away beneath the night. Elio poured the chocolate into small, waiting molds, each one shaped like a little cocoa pod with a leaf curled around it. The molds sat neatly in a row, patiently ready. As the liquid filled them, he felt that familiar calm settle over him, the one that always arrived when he was completely absorbed in his craft. But tonight, there was something else in the air as well, something he could not quite name. A small prickle of anticipation, light as a fingertip running along the edge of a page. Earlier that afternoon, just before closing, a stranger had stepped into the shop. She had been wrapped in a long, dark coat with a hood, a scattering of raindrops clinging to the fabric like tiny crystals. Her face had been kind and pale, with lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of much laughter and much listening. She had walked slowly around the shop, her gaze lingering on the jars and boxes, on the trays of truffles lined up like little constellations. When she reached the counter, she had placed a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with a twine bow in front of him. "For you," she had said, her voice as mellow as the evening light. "Not for sale, a gift. Perhaps it will inspire you tonight." Before he could ask her name, before he could offer her anything in return, she had smiled, turned, and stepped back into the rain, the bell above the door chiming softly in her wake. Now the parcel sat beside the molds, patiently waiting, just as it had all evening. Elio had delayed opening it, not because he was suspicious, but because he understood that certain surprises need the right quiet around them, the right stillness. And now, with the rain whispering at the window, the cat sleeping by the heater, and the last batch of chocolate poured, the moment felt like it had finally arrived. He dried his hands on his apron and untied the twine. The knot loosened easily, the paper unfolding with a soft, papery sigh. Inside was a small carved wooden box, no larger than the palm of his hand. The lid had been etched with delicate patterns of vines and leaves, looping and curling around one another in an endless gentle dance. When he lifted the lid, a warm, earthy scent drifted up toward him. Something rich and deep and slightly floral. Nestled inside the box were cocoa beans, but not like any he had seen before. Their shells were a shade darker, as though they had been kissed by midnight, with faint iridescent glimmers along their edges that caught the light in soft flashes of indigo and bronze. Resting atop the beans was a folded piece of paper, its surface worn smooth with time. Elio lifted it carefully and unfolded it. The message inside was written in an elegant, looping hand. "For the chocolates you make at night when the town is quiet and the world is soft, these beans will listen to your wishes. Use only a few. Think gentle thoughts." He reread the note slowly, a small smile touching his lips. It could have been a charming little whim, a bit of poetry left by a kind stranger. Yet the beans themselves intrigued him. He had worked with cocoa from many regions, but nothing quite like this. He took a slow breath and selected a few of the beans from the box. They were warm to the touch, as though they had been resting in sunlight rather than in a wooden container on a cool evening. He carried them to the small grinder at the back of the shop, his footsteps whispering over the floorboards. Nutmeg, hearing the movement, opened one eye and watched as he began to crack the beans, the faint sound blending with the rain and the ticking clock. Then, satisfied that this was nothing to worry about, she tucked her nose back under her tail and returned to her dreams. As Elio ground the beans, a deep fragrance rose up, rich and velvety. It reminded him of distant orchards at dusk, of warm bread, of one particular evening when he had sat on a hillside as a child, watching fireflies blink in the long grass. The scent seemed to curl around his memories, weaving through them, softening their edges. He melted the ground cocoa with a small amount of his tempered chocolate, stirring slowly, watching the texture deepen. He remembered the stranger's instructions and let his thoughts grow soft. He thought of warmth, of comfort, of the feeling someone had when they stepped into his shop after a cold day and wrapped their fingers around a cup of hot chocolate. He thought of small joys and quiet moments. A mother opening a box of truffles on a tired evening and closing her eyes as she savored a single bite. A couple sharing a piece of dark chocolate at the river's edge. Fingers brushing, water murmuring at their feet. A child pressing their nose to the glass, eyes bright with anticipation. With every gentle thought, the chocolate seemed to change, though he could not say how. The scent grew more complex, more tender. The surface, as he stirred, gleamed with a soft, internal glow, like moonlight reflected in a deep pool. He poured the mixture into a small set of molds shaped like tiny stars. It felt right, though he could not explain why. There were only a few of them nestled among the more ordinary chocolates, like quiet little wishes. When the molds had cooled, he tapped them free onto a tray. The star-shaped chocolates gleamed faintly, their surfaces smooth, as though polished by invisible hands. He picked one up and held it between his fingers, suddenly uncertain whether he should taste it. In the end, he placed it on his tongue and let it melt without biting. The flavor unfolded slowly, petal by petal. It was familiar at first, warm, rich cocoa, a faint sweetness, the comfort of milk, the whisper of orange blossom. Then as he closed his eyes, he felt something else, something gentler than even the softest memory. It was a sense of belonging, like the feeling of stepping into a room and knowing that everyone inside is glad you were there. It was the sensation of the first deep breath, taken after a long day, the moment when the body begins to understand that it is safe to rest. He swallowed and opened his eyes, a peaceful stillness settling over him. The shop seemed unchanged, and yet the air felt a little softer, as though a sigh of contentment had drifted through it. Elio placed the star-shaped chocolates carefully on a small plate and set it on the counter near the door. He did not quite know why he did this, only that it felt right, as though these chocolates were meant to be found. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song, brushing against the windows, pooling in tiny rivulets along the cobblestones. The street was largely empty now, save for the occasional passerby hurrying home beneath an umbrella. He was nearly ready to close entirely, to turn off the lamps and join Nutmeg in her dreams, when he heard a soft, hesitant tapping at the door. The bell did not ring. The door remained firmly shut. But the tapping came again, gentle and uncertain. Elio wiped his hands and walked to the door, peering through the glass. On the steps stood a small family caught in the rain. A woman with tired, kind eyes, a little boy clutching a damp scarf, and beside them, an older man leaning lightly on a wooden cane. Their clothes were simple, and their faces carried that particular sort of weariness that comes at the end of a journey. He hesitated only for a heartbeat, then smiled and unlocked the door, opening it just enough to let the warm air spill out onto the rainy street. "I am sorry," he said softly. "I'm closed for the evening." The woman returned his smile, though hers was tinged with apology. "We saw the light," she replied, her voice gentle. "Our train was delayed, and we arrived much later than expected. We have a room at the inn nearby, but my father," she glanced toward the man at her side, "has been talking about your chocolate since we left the last town. We hoped, just for a moment, that perhaps..." Her words trailed off, not wanting to impose. Elio looked at them, then back into his warm, quiet shop, and then at the small plate of star-shaped chocolates resting on the counter. The choice was so simple that it felt less like a decision and more like a natural step in a dance that had already begun. "Come in," he said. "Just for a few minutes. I cannot sell you much tonight, but there is something I would like you to try." They stepped inside, gratefully shaking the rain from their coats. The little boy's eyes widened as he took in the shelves and trays, the gleam of chocolate under the lamp. Nutmeg lifted her head, considered them with sleepy interest, and then, seeing no cause for alarm, nestled back into her cushion. Elio guided them to the small counter and set the plate of star-shaped chocolates before them. "These are new," he explained quietly. "A bit of an evening experiment. You are my first tasters." The older man chuckled, his voice lined with age and warmth. "I have always believed," he said, "that the best chocolates are the ones discovered by accident." He picked up one of the little stars with careful fingers and held it close for a moment, inhaling the scent. His eyelids fluttered briefly, as though touched by a delicate breeze from long ago. The woman and the boy each took one as well. Together they placed the chocolates in their mouths and let them melt, just as Elio had done. The shop grew very quiet. The rain outside faded to a distant whisper. The clock's ticking seemed to slow. The woman closed her eyes, and in that instant she was standing in a small kitchen many years ago, watching her mother stir a pot of hot cocoa on the stove, the steam curling like ghosts of stories yet to be told. The warmth of it spread through her, not as a memory to cling to, but as a gentle reminder that love, once given, never truly disappears. The older man felt himself seated on a train, long past, rusted with time, sharing a simple bar of dark chocolate with the friends of his youth, as fields and forests blurred by outside the window. He remembered laughter, the clatter of wheels, the feeling that the world was wide and open before them. The taste of the chocolate brought not longing, but a soft gratitude for the paths he had walked. The young boy, who had worries too big for his age about new schools and new towns and leaving familiar places behind, felt something loosen in his chest. For him, the chocolate tasted like a clear sky after rain, like the way a blanket feels when it is tucked carefully around his shoulders. The fear did not vanish, but it grew smaller, more distant, like clouds drifting to the edge of a blue horizon. Elio watched them quietly, his hands folded, his own heart settling into a peaceful rhythm. He did not need to ask what they were feeling. He could see it in the relaxed line of their shoulders, in the softening of their faces. When they opened their eyes, there was a hush around them, a calm that had not been there before. "What is this?" the woman asked softly, almost in a whisper, as though speaking too loudly would break the spell. "A simple chocolate," Elio replied, his voice just as gentle. "With a little something extra from a gift I received today. It seems it is meant for travelers arriving late and tired." The older man smiled, a slow, deep smile that lit his face from within. "Whatever it is," he said, "you must keep making it for nights like this." They stayed only a little longer, enough for the boy to choose a small box of ordinary truffles for the next day, and for Elio to wrap them with care. The woman thanked him, her eyes bright with a quiet emotion, and the older man squeezed his hand with surprising strength, as though conveying more gratitude than words could carry. Then they stepped back into the rain, which had softened to a mist, and disappeared down the lane toward the inn, their footsteps fading into the evening. Elio watched them go, then closed the door once more, turning the lock with a soft click. He glanced at the plate on the counter. One star-shaped chocolate remained. He picked it up and set it on a small saucer, placing it next to the wooden box of mysterious beans. "For another traveler," he murmured, "another night." The shop was very quiet now. Nutmeg purred softly in her sleep, her paws tucked under her chest. The clock ticked steadily on the wall, marking each gentle moment that slipped by. The lamplight seemed to dim itself, without any need for him to touch the switch, as though the shop understood that the night was ready to deepen. Elio took one last look around his little kingdom of cocoa and sugar. The trays were neatly arranged, the pots cleaned and stacked, the molds resting in their places. Everything hummed with the faint echo of the day's work, the contented sigh of creation. He turned off the lamp above the counter, leaving only the small nightlight near Nutmeg's cushion. It cast a soft amber halo that barely touched the shelves, just enough glow to keep the darkness kind and gentle. He slipped off his apron, folded it, and set it on a hook by the door. Then he crossed the room and knelt to stroke Nutmeg's fur, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of her breath beneath his palm. "Sleep well," he whispered to the cat, though perhaps he was speaking to the shop, to the town, to the night itself. He stepped through the door, leading to his small room at the back, where a simple bed waited beneath a thick quilt. As he lay down, the faint scent of chocolate still clung to his hands and to the air, wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. The rain eased gradually, its tapping growing softer and softer until it became only a distant murmur, a lullaby sung by clouds drifting across the dark sky. In the shop, the star-shaped chocolate and the wooden box rested side by side, patient and unhurried, ready for whatever quiet wonder the next evening might bring. And outside the town slept, each home a little island of dreams, floating in the gentle sea of night. Now as the chocolatier and his cat sink into their own soft sleep, your body too can follow the quiet path toward rest. Notice your breath again, the simple, steady rise and fall that has been with you this whole time. There is nothing you need to change about it. Just notice how each inhalation arrives on its own and each exhalation leaves, carrying away any last scraps of tension that might still be lingering. Imagine that you are resting in a room like the chocolatier's shop after closing, warm and safe, surrounded by the faint scent of chocolate and vanilla. The lights are low, casting a gentle glow along the floorboards. Somewhere close by, a clock ticks in slow, drowsy beats. With each breath out, you feel your muscles loosening as though someone has untied a series of small, tight knots and allowed them to unfurl. Your shoulders grow heavier, sinking into the surface beneath you. Your hands soften, your legs relax, completely supported and at ease. Thoughts may still wander in, like customers arriving late to a shop that is already closed for the night. You can greet them kindly and let them go again, watching as they drift away down the quiet lane of your mind. Nothing needs to be solved right now. Nothing needs to be fixed. In this moment, there is only warmth, softness, and rest. Beyond your closed eyes, imagine the cobbled street, the faint shimmer of lamplight on the wet stones, the small shop with its curtains drawn and its sign turned to closed. Inside, everything is peaceful. The chocolates rest on their trays. The mysterious beans sleep in their wooden box. Nutmeg curls into a tighter spiral of dreams. The entire scene grows dimmer, as though you are walking backward through a gentle fog, watching the details blur and soften. The edges of the shelves fade. The clock's ticking stretches into longer and longer spaces. Even the scent of chocolate becomes a quiet memory, drifting to the corners of your awareness. You are held in a cocoon of calm. The night around you is kind. The world can wait until morning. If a stray thought returns, you can imagine placing it carefully into a small parchment envelope, like a recipe or a letter, and setting it on the counter of the chocolatier's shop. You can trust that it will be there tomorrow if you need it, safe and undisturbed. For now, you step away, leaving it behind as you move deeper into the soft, velvety darkness of sleep. Your breath continues, slow and even. Your heartbeat moves in its quiet rhythm. Every part of you is invited to rest, to release, to float. The the story curls to a close like a ribbon around a small box of chocolates, tied with a gentle final knot. Nothing more is needed. Nothing more must be done. Allow your mind to drift as if you are following a thin thread of cocoa-scented air into the deepest part of the night where dreams are tender and welcoming, and time moves in wide, peaceful circles. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.